lack of fiber in on a carnivore diet. Do you think we should be concerned about not getting any fiber? Like, what is the actual role of fiber in the body? Do we need it?
We don't. We don't. I mean, this is a pretty disruptive concept, but I mean, at the risk of, I could outline it a little bit. The fiber story is always kind of a rabbit hole, but I'll just sort of I'll stay kind of simple with it to say that, you know, if you look at the studies, why do people say we need fiber? Well, I think the most common answer would be we need fiber to poop. Well, but we don't. And if you actually look at the studies, you know, in cases of idiopathic constipation, removal of fiber, you know, has been shown to have incredible efficacy. In fact, the study I'm thinking of, you know, it showed 100% resolution of idiopathic constipation when they remove fiber. So this is quite counterculture, and people are like, you know, lose their mind every time I say that. But if you look at the data, there's really no data that fiber improves constipation, though you'll see it on every single website in the world. You know, if you have constipation, eat plenty of fiber. Well, there's no data to support this. And in fact, the opposite is true. You know, if you look at the interventional studies, you know, the removal of fiber improves constipation. So if people have constipation, there are a number of things that can cause constipation, but, you know, the removal of fiber is essentially beneficial for that process alone. So what else do we need fiber for? Well, people say you need fiber for, people also say diverticulosis. Well, that's completely false as well. So diverticulosis is this outpouching of the submucosal layer, the mucosa and the submucosa of the colon through the muscularis mucosa to form these blind pouches, these diverticuli. And that story started with a surgeon named Burkitt in the 50s and 60s. And essentially what we found when we've done further studies is that fiber is not protective against diverticulosis at all. And there are some studies to suggest that the more fiber people eat, the more diverticulosis they have. So fiber doesn't protect against diverticulosis. It doesn't protect against it's not useful for constipation. It doesn't make us poop. Anyone on a carnivore diet can tell you that they poop usually just fine without it. And then, you know, people will say, well, doesn't fiber protect us against cancer? No. There's many studies from 99, 2000, New England Journal of Medicine. They were trying furiously. These are big studies, 2,000 people, 80,000 people. The 80,000 persons trial was an epidemiology study, but the 2,000 person trial, there are multiple studies in the New England Journal of Medicine from 99 and 2000, which were over 2,000 participants. One of them included fruits and vegetables in the diet as an intervention. The other one included a cereal fiber supplement in the diet, and no improvement in colorectal adenoma or precursor lesions. So fiber doesn't protect us against colon cancer. It's just this crazy story, you know?
Yeah.
And then you go further down the list. Well, doesn't fiber lower our cholesterol? No. If you really look at the studies with fiber and cholesterol, it only lowers it maybe 3 milligrams per deciliter, which is within the limit of statistical error. And 3 milligrams per deciliter is essentially nothing if we're talking about LDL. It doesn't really change blood pressure. I mean, it doesn't do anything. You know, soluble fiber can be damaging to the gut. And I would argue for people with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or, you know, processes involving bacterial dysbiosis, fiber is going to be very dangerous for them and worsens it. And I think anyone with those conditions will know that, you know, fiber is the worst thing for them, and avoidance of fiber, you know, often results in significant improvements in their symptoms. So, you know, this is, and then we get into this, you know, perhaps the most esoteric discussion is saying, well, don't we need fiber for a healthy gut microbiome? And I mean, this is probably the most absurd of any of these discussions in my mind, that, you know, if you really look at the data for that, and this is kind of one of my major problems with what's going on in today's world of health literature and media, is that, you know, it's easy enough for me or anyone else to get on a podcast and say something, but can the people support it with data? And that's what's not being done, right? So, you know, Stephen Gundry is on podcasts, and, you know, whether it's David Perlmutter or Mark Hyman, I mean, I respect all these guys, but look, they're all saying, you know, you need fiber for healthy gut microbiome, but there's no data to support that. And the one study that I'm aware of from the journal Cell in 2016 was done in mice, you know, and it doesn't even translate into humans. They took mice, they raised the mice without bacteria in their gut, and then they introduced a human-like microbiome of 14 species. Well, so this is a completely contrived model, and they deprived the mice of fiber, and they created this microbiome of 14 species to be fiber loving, and they deprive that microbiome of fiber, and the mucus layer goes down. But if you read the paper, there's no change in the histopathology of the gut lining, suggesting there's no damage to the gut. The mucus went down a little bit, but there was no damage to the actual gut or inflammation. So, people have to remember that it's in mice and that it's a completely contrived microbiome. When we actually look in humans, you see all kinds of crazy stuff. People have increased alpha diversity when they go carnivore, when they remove fiber. They get, the certain populations of bacteria go way up. I mean, I've tested my microbiome twice in the last 7.5 months, and I have all the populations, lactobacillus, bifidobacteria, all the populations you're supposed to have in your gut, I have in my gut. And people have done ubiome and biome. And I mean, the microbiome changes, but we don't know enough about the microbiome to say one way or the other. And clearly, people on carnivore diets are not developing inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or IBS. In fact, resoundingly, what's happening is that people with those conditions are improving or completely finding resolution. So clinically, what we're seeing is nothing suggesting that a fiberless diet is going to wreak havoc on your microbiome. I would argue that the idea you need fiber for a microbiome is pretty absurd and unsupported by science as well. So the long-winded answer to your question about fiber is no, we don't need it. There's no benefit. And, in plant-based circles, people will say that fiber is a plant nutrient. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, is toilet paper a nutrient? Like, is cardboard a nutrient? I mean, there's soluble and insoluble fiber, and I'm speaking with a little bit of hyperbole here, but it's not a nutrient.